Good morning. Welcome into the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. And we've got a quarterfinal game, Ole Miss and Georgia in New Orleans, in the Caesars Superdome, January 1st. Georgia's laying 6.5. This is a rematch or whatever you want to call it. They play again. I know they played in Athens. It was one hell of a football game. And Georgia ended up, Ole Miss had their way for a while, and then Georgia ended up dominating the fourth quarter and going on a 17-0 run and pinned their ears back as far as running the football. But we could have a hell of a ball game between Pete Golding and Kirby Smart down in New Orleans in a week and a half. We are the Out of Bounds Show. We're driven by Total Transportation of Mississippi. They offer nationwide and regional routes for solo and team drivers. Apply today, totalms.com. Weekly pay and monthly bonuses and full benefits. Powered by Total Transportation of Mississippi. Visit totalms.com. And the application is right there on the first page, on the front page. We want to welcome in Tom Luginbill, National College Football Analyst with ESPN. And Lugs, the Ole Miss, Tulane, and James Madison, Oregon game were snoozers, but Friday night was a wild game, and Saturday morning was a defensive battle. Out of the two games that were more competitive, what jumped out at you, or what was your one big takeaway on those two, or one of those two?
Line of scrimmage play with everybody involved, which is why this next round of the playoff will be the most competitively balanced, evenly matched set of games we've ever had in any playoff format in major college football. You look at the fronts for Alabama and Oklahoma, the fronts for A&M and Miami. You look at the difference in the fronts between Tulane and Ole Miss and JMU and Oregon, and it tells all of the story. I think the other thing to note is how important it is to win in the margins, right? That game for Alabama and Oklahoma did not flip until Alabama made a play in the kicking game, which changed their field position status, which had been horrible in the entire first quarter. The kicking game in the Miami-Texas A&M game with the wind looked like it was going to doom Miami. They somehow overcome it because they were able to generate a run game in the latter part of the third quarter and the entire fourth quarter. So it's those little tiny things that become big and magnified now that the matchups are getting even more squarely competitive than, let's just say, what we saw from Oregon and JMU and, of course, Tulane and Ole Miss.
All right, I like it. Tom Luginbill on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. Ole Miss, Georgia. Georgia's laying 6.5. They already played. It was a hell of a football game. Pete Golding against Kirby Smart. When you're sizing this up and looking at this matchup, where do you start, Luke?
Oh, it's a really good question, because I think when you have rematches like this and you're really starting to study and you're making a play for, okay, where's the edge here? What did we do last time? What did we do this time? What worked? What didn't work? The quarterback position, I think, for both players is so dramatically improved. So I think you have to account for that. But for me, I think that you cannot, if you're Georgia, who's played unbelievable team defense the last 4 weeks, not counting the Charlotte game, they have just absolutely dominated their opponent. But with Trinidad Chambliss at Ole Miss, the X factor there is his ability to run. And I also believe the X factor for Ole Miss on defense is when Mike Bobo wants to, he can get the quarterback going and create problems for Ole Miss as well. So I think that part of it is the most important thing to me, is how can you create a defensive game plan where the quarterback's legs are not a factor? And that's a challenge. I mean, look at the Miami-Texas A&M game in the first half. How many times did Miami have Marcel Reed dead to rights, right, in that first half? It was going to be a 6-yard loss, a 7-yard loss. And almost all of them were on third down. And the next thing you know, it's a first down because Marcel Reed made plays with his legs. You can't allow that to happen in any way, shape, or form if you are Georgia or Ole Miss on defense.
Okay. All right, so we got Gunnar Stockton and Trinidad Chambliss that have improved throughout the year. Who has more weapons on the offensive side of the football, Ole Miss or Georgia?
I think Ole Miss has more weapons. I think Ole Miss has better pure skill as a whole in terms of the variety of different weapons they have. But it's also two entirely different, modes of operation, if you will. You know, Georgia is a heavy outside screen team. They have not been a notable vertical passing game. They haven't been a big explosive wide receiver team, and Ole Miss has. So the approach is a little bit different. I think Ole Miss tries to utilize some of their personnel more so in the intermediate and deep passing game, where Georgia's going to run the football. They're going to throw the quick screens on the perimeter to try to supplement the run game and then let guys do what they do in space. But I would go with Ole Miss just because of how they attack the field.
Who's better when you take both line of scrimmages?
I would probably say Georgia has a slight edge, even though they've had to play with some youngsters. But their youngster, Dontrell Glover, he might be a freshman, but he's also a freshman All-American, and he don't play like one. I think that I still think there's a slight difference in overall talent profile as it relates to depth between Georgia and Ole Miss on both sides of the ball. Georgia right now, Bo, they may not have the flashier names like we've seen in the past, but they're playing as good, if not better, team defense than they've played in the last few years.
Okay, so you give Georgia the edge on defense between the two.
Yeah, I think so. The way they're playing right now, yeah.
Okay.
The other thing in all this too, Bo, real quick is, and this applies to all of the games that are upcoming, is when you have an emotional win and you have momentum and you have intensity like an Alabama has right now, like a Miami has right now, and you're coming off of that, and you're Georgia, you've played a game, you're Ole Miss, you've played a game. You're now going to take on somebody that's been sitting for 20 days. Does the bye help them or does it hurt them?
Right. You mentioned last week Georgia was going to have almost 4 weeks off, and it looks like they're going to get some players back after getting beat up throughout the season. Talk a little bit about that, Luke.
Well, I think that's the whole reward of a bye, right? And we saw it actually with Alabama. You know, Alabama played with 5 or 6, 7 guys in the game against Oklahoma. They did not play against Georgia in the SEC championship game. So to be able to get healthy late in the season where everybody's worn down, everybody's got bumps and bruises, you're trying to find the right mix of players to put on the field. I do think that is an advantage, whereas playing this past weekend, you had to prepare your team quicker. You might have had to play a little bit more banged up. And now you have a little bit more mileage on the chassis. If you're Ole Miss, if you're Miami, if you're Oregon, if you're Alabama, than those teams that sat. So again, it can be a blessing and a curse. It can be a reward, but it can also be something to where it can lead you to come out flat. I know, like in the National Football League, you know, there are times where a team finishes hot in the National Football League and they earn a bye, and it hurts them.
Right.
They don't want the bye. They want to just play. They want to just carry over and play.
Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show, driven by your next GMC Sierra truck at Fowler GMC, Pearl Brandon. So would you say Trinidad's more talented than Gunner? Or they're just different, and what Bobo wants to do is different from what Charlie Weiss and Kiffin wanted to do?
I wouldn't say he's more talented. I would say he's more dynamic.
Okay.
I think that both of them have a lot of ability. Both of them can throw it. Both of them can run it. I think that Trinidad Chambliss is a little bit more explosive, a little bit maybe more creative when the initial play breaks down, but equally talented in relationship to being able to get the job done. Like if you sat here and you told me that you were going to flip quarterbacks and you were going to say, okay, well, Gunnar Stockton's going to play for Ole Miss this week, and Trinidad Chambliss is going to play for Alabama or for Georgia, I think they both have success.
Okay. Nate Frazier, Kewan Lacey, two very now Georgia's got some really good depth behind Nate Frazier, but he's a dude. Lacey has had a hell of a year. Talk about them stylistically and how they can cause problems for the other defense.
I think one in Frazier is more of your downhill between the tackles, power runner that's got good elusiveness and quickness, can break tackles, is not going to go down upon first contact, good contact balance, where I think Lacey is a little bit more of your space player, which means that it doesn't mean he can't run on the inside. But if you got the inside zone and that cutback presents itself, he's going to be so explosive and quick with his feet to be able to hit that cut back across the grain. And then the ability to get to the perimeter and get in space is where probably he's at his best. It's a really good comp matchup, I think. Two different styles. But I'll also say this. I don't think those are X factor people in the game. And if they become X factor people in the game, it's going to be because of what happens in front of them.
Okay. So you don't think those two are two of the X factor guys?
I'm of the belief that when you get into a game like this, all right, you're the team, you can run the football, you can't run the football, okay? You can struggle to run the football or maybe you run it moderately. But you get into this type of matchup, this is about the quarterback play, and this is about the front on both sides of the ball for both teams. If Ole Miss has a hell of a day in the up front, the running back's probably going to have a hell of a day, right?
Right.
Vice versa, the same thing for Georgia. But also the opposite can happen. You get stuffed at the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden you can't run the football at all, then it doesn't matter if Kewan Lacey's on the field.
Okay. Let's see. Georgia's defense. Give me the best unit out of the four lines, Luke's.
The best unit out of the four lines, you mean?
Two offensive lines, two defensive lines between Ole Miss and Georgia.
As a whole, I would say Georgia on both sides of the ball. As a whole, I think that Ole Miss can match up really well in the offensive line. But as I said before, I don't think they have the overall rotational depth that Georgia still has. For example, most teams, if they got to go play at the end of the season in a rivalry game against Georgia Tech, or they got to play in a conference championship game, like a team against Alabama, and they lose their starting center, their right guard's a true freshman, and they're rotating a true freshman in the offensive line, most teams don't survive that. Georgia survives that.
Okay. Yeah, because they've been playing, you referenced one earlier, but they've been playing several true freshmen that have been unbelievable for them.
And remember, they didn't have Drew Bobo the last few weeks at center, so they had to rotate another guy in there too. I mean, you talk about a critical position that not only has to play well, he's got to be your communicator.
Damn. And they still blew out Bama. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. So the winner of Ole Miss Georgia will play Ohio State and Miami. Do you give a real significant edge in this game to Ohio State or a thumbnail?
Thumbnail. I think that if you watched Miami and you saw them up front on defense and what they did to a Texas A&M offense that has gone up and down the field on virtually everybody they've played, that was one hell of an impressive outing on the road in that environment, bad wind conditions. And I still think Miami's got the best offensive line in college football. And when you watch the latter part of the third quarter and the entirety of the fourth quarter, when you saw Miami impose their will in the run game, I mean, Mark Fletcher rushed for 172 yards. 91 of them were in the fourth quarter alone. And they just laid it on A&M. And so the challenge, again, and I said this earlier about some of the plays that Marcel Reed made with his legs, and Miami eventually shut it down, but that's not how the game started. That's a little concerning because Julian Sand, while he's not as dynamic as Marcel Reed, but he is an athlete that can get out of trouble and create. See, that's the one thing about Miami that I don't love is what you see is what you get with Carson Beck. He has to win with his arm, his mind, anticipation, and timing. He doesn't have the ability to pull a rabbit out of the hat. He doesn't have when Ohio State's playing defense against Miami, they're not worried about where the quarterback's going to be. They know where he's going to be. They don't have to worry about rush lanes. They don't have to worry about scrambles because that's not what he brings to the table. And I think that's an advantage for Ohio State on defense.
Luke's hanging out with us on the Out of Bounds Show. We're talking college football playoffs. So the winner of Georgia and Ole Miss plays the winner of Miami and Ohio State. And Luginbill's talking about how this is the most competitive slate of games that we've ever had, which is freaking awesome in college
football. Do you think
football.
it is? I don't even think it's close.
I do think it is.
I don't even think it's close.
I mean,
it
God.
is, when you look at how these teams are built, look at why they are there, and all of the and the shame of it is we had to go through those two Group of 5 teams this past weekend, while a Notre Dame and a Texas or a Vandy or a BYU is sitting at home. So the number one thing we need to do is we need to quit pretending that this is the 12 best teams in college football.
Right.
It's not. It's not. And I love the Group of 5. I broadcasted dozens upon dozens of Group of 5 games for years. There's a reason why there's different levels of college football, Bo, because there's different levels of talent.
Right.
And anybody that watched that, and anybody who watched it a year ago, all right, could see it, and it wasn't even close. So if we're going to do anything to try to improve this deal, we have got to come up with, I think, some more stringent standards for the Group of 5 to be included. And I don't want to. We're basically it's socialism versus capitalism.
It is.
And it's not good for the sport. It's not. And again, that doesn't take away from the accomplishments of a JMU. Or
Absolutely not.
But it's man against boys. It's varsity versus JV. And you know what we can do? Let's go out. Yeah, I got a great idea. How about we go out and we use all the bowls that nobody cares about anymore, and we use those bowls to create a Group of 5 playoff.
Absolutely.
Right? Now
yes.
You got interest in the bowls.
Yes.
You got interest in the bowls. You have an opportunity to advance. The bowls all of a sudden mean something now, right? And you've pitted equal against equal in their playoff format.
Yes.
And I think that would be great. I think another idea is we got to have more requirements. You either have to finish in the top 12 overall. That's just to be considered. That doesn't guarantee you a spot. You have to have beaten one top 20 Power 4 team on your schedule. But we can't just allow this thing to be automatic the way it is right now.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Tom Luginbill with ESPN's college football team. He joins us on the Out of Bounds show, brought to you by the Wings and Stella Artois at Martin's and Livingston. That's perfect for game day. I want to go to Alabama and Indiana, Luke's. What a wild game Friday night between Bama and Oklahoma. How much trouble is Alabama in going to play this game in the Rose Bowl and the fact that they can't run the football against a Kurt Signetti team and the way they're built on defense, Luke's?
Well, it'll be interesting to see which Alabama team we see. Is it the one in the last 2 quarters or the first 2 quarters on offense? Because offensively, they started to hit their stride in the second half and started to kind of control the narrative. Because that first half, I think that Alabama knows exactly who they are. They know what their deficiencies are. They know what their strengths are, which requires them to have to win in the margins. So if you look at that game against Oklahoma, all right, clearly Oklahoma wins early on offense. It's 17-0. But then what happened? Alabama won in the kicking game as a result with the block punt, shifted field position. Then they started winning on defense. So Alabama won 2/3 of that game and got themselves back in it, and then all of a sudden the offense came alive. Against Indiana, I agree with you. Indiana has shut down, for the most part, Oregon's attack and Ohio State's attack. Unbelievably impressive. But I do believe there's something to be said for having lived in this environment for so many years the way Alabama has. The fact that they have played, they have the opportunity to carry over that momentum, and I'm going to be very interested to see how Indiana shows up. They'll be well prepared. They're going to be well coached. They're the number 1 team in the country. They've earned it. I get all of that. But I do think that as a team, as a whole, Indiana's the better team. But if you allow Alabama and their talent to linger and hang around, you're going to be in a dogfight in the latter part of the fourth quarter.
Okay. All right. So you give a slight edge to Ohio State in the Ohio State-Miami game, I think is what I'm picking up here. All right. You give a slight edge to Indiana in Indiana-Bama,
Yep.
but you made the point on Bama's what they've done the last 15 years. All right. And then Ole Miss Georgia, I think I'm picking up a very slight edge to Georgia in that game.
Very slight. That's my biggest toss-up. Actually, yeah, that's my biggest toss-up. And if you ask me, okay, what's the one you're most concerned about? Without question, it's Texas Tech. Because Texas Tech has not played a team even remotely close to what Oregon is all year long.
Okay. In the trenches, physicality, right?
Yeah. In the trenches, the skill on the perimeter, the quarterback, Oregon is an entirely different animal. And while Texas Tech has met or exceeded every expectation that was placed upon them this fall, this is also uncharted water for them. And they too have been off. While basically Oregon just had a scrimmage, and they played a ton of their twos and their threes, in some instances their fours, in that game to prepare them for a run. That would be the biggest concern, in my opinion, of the matchups that we have. Not because Texas Tech's not capable, but because you look at, hey, listen, Ole Miss and Oregon have played, okay? We saw Alabama, Oklahoma, they're familiar with each other. They've played each other before. All right, you got Ohio State. They're going to be familiar with Miami's talent. But this is not familiarity with Texas Tech.
Good point. Okay. Tom Luginbill on the show. We only got a minute or so. What's your schedule just out of curiosity, what's your schedule the next 2 weeks?
Unbelievably, I don't have anything on the slate in writing right now, so I get to reintroduce myself to my family and spend some quality time at home. I'm not on the road. I actually get to be home for Christmas this year. I'll head down to Orlando on the 30th for the Under Armour All-America game, as we always do down there to kick off the first week of January. And then when I come back, the first 2 weeks of January, I've got College Football Live on Monday and Tuesday as we start, really getting and digging down into the playoffs.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you, my man. And Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Yeah, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you too, man.
Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 1059 The Zone, national college football analyst. He called the James Madison, Oregon game. He just ran through the 4 college football playoff games, the quarterfinal games that are left out there. And these are really, really competitive matchups all the way up and down. He's got Ole Miss and Georgia as the biggest toss-up, and he's got Oregon and Texas Tech as possibly Oregon pulling away a little bit because of who Texas Tech played or didn't play, however you want to run the numbers. For Jackson Meadows, I'm your host, Bo Bounds. Thanks for listening to the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 1059 The Zone. And yes, we will be back tomorrow. We're doing another show this week. We have to. Show is brought to you by Southern Ag Credit, financing light outside the city limits. Southern Ag Credit.com, financing life outside the city limits. Lunch today brought to you by B3, Burgers, Blues Barbecue in Dogwood, Flowwood. We were there last week. Great place to grab lunch. We'll see you tomorrow.